Hi, I'm the True Wise Gamer, giving off my vast knowledge so you may understand games a bit better. Today we're reviewing SMT5, a game that we all thought would never happen, but lo and behold, it happened. But I did want to ask a simple question when I originally got this game. Am I the only one who's a lot more disappointed in the game than everyone else? Because I'm going to end by saying I like it, but it has a lot of problems that prevent me from really liking it. You know what I mean? But let's get more into that. So before we talk about SMT5, let's talk about the Shin Megami Tensei series as a whole before we get going. The Shin Megami Tensei series is a very old series, like, I'm talking NES era old. You know, before the likes of Pokemon and Digimon took over the monster capturing genre, instead just using the fun old demons, cause Japan, am I right? As would any other franchise would do. Instead of just having just mainly mainline games, they also have sub-games like the Persona series, which is ironically so popular that it still eclipses the mainline game series. And yes, they are a part of the same series, cause one, they use the same demon design, so why the fuck shouldn't I? And two, really? You're really gonna argue semantics about this? It's like arguing that a Pokemon Ranger game or Mystery Dungeon isn't Pokemon, because reason. Though the Persona sub-series isn't just the only one. You have series like the Devil Survivor series or the Raito series, which deals with different themes in general with the underlying theme of, well, the Shin Megami Tensei series, which I'll promise to get to that at the end. Just note, I'm trying to build to something. Point is, it's got a lot of games and a lot of history, with a grand majority of it being pretty damn good. Well, except some of its early stuff, because it's the early stuff and that was a different time. So it's going to be a weird, jarring thing when I say that I'm not a fan of the mainline games at all, since they just never appealed to me. And honestly, I couldn't help but get a feeling that I'm going to have the same issues with this game like I did with the other past mainline games. And it did. It's overall still a good game. It's just that I just wish the game got the criticism it deserves so that the next game will just be a better game overall. So, let's properly begin the review for SMT5. The game begins with a pointless intro monologue that I just couldn't care less about, because it's one of those flowery monologues where it's not really doing much but just sound grandiose. I usually hate monologues in games unless it's exposition, like going over a character's backstory or touching upon their feelings about a thing quickly. Otherwise, I hate them, and it really doesn't do anything to begin with. It's just there. You begin with silent protag MC walking to the school, and I have to wonder when we will be able to increase our social stats, cause good lord, look at that walk cycle. It's just bad. After filling in what's our name and all that basic stuff, we meet, not important, should have been the main female character, what's her face, dead, and lamer. I'll explain the names in a bit, I promise. There's a good reason for why I'm doing so. We learn quickly on that there has been some gruesome murders happening, as we had to find a buddy to walk back home to the dorm. Yeah, a high school with a dormitory. That one's entirely new to me. I mean, I would think it is a thing, but I've never actually seen it be a thing. After not important leads, we have to find him, which involves following Lamer and Dead Man walking. Side note, what the hell happened to this guy anyway? Actually, thinking on that, why the hell were we following these two? But it doesn't matter, as not important tells us to leave, but it's already too late as the tunnel collapses on us. Well, that was short. Though while short, I do have to give the game some points for at least trying to kill us off in an interesting manner. I mean, when was the last time a character ever got killed off by earthquake in a video game? 0 out of 10. Would not play. Say what? Oh, there's more. This somehow takes us to another place that it's just a complete desert. As we explore, we see Lamer being taken away by an angel as demons. No, not those demons. Daemons. Big difference. Actually, speaking on this, why aren't they called imps? Since that's what they look like to me to begin with. Or can we just call these things demons and just call everything else daemons? Since that's the term they usually mean when they mean demons. So anyway, the imps are about to kill us till this guy, Susanoo. His name's Algami? No, it's not. It's Susanoo. Because it's a far more interesting and cooler name than the Algami. But also it has a story for a reason why. I'll get to that, which is actually a little more confusing now thinking about this. Susanoo decides to assist us by actually fusing with us to become a Naruhito, which gives us the glorious... It's a goddamn lightsaber! And I'll just explain what it is now, since I'm going to speed through everything cause it's a lot of fluff. See, a Naruhito is a god's true form. See, a long time ago, the gods were all equal and all tried to gain the throne, which is basically whoever gets it becomes the new ruler of the world. Sort of, it's complicated. Then, and he was all like, fuck that shit, and took all the gods' knowledge, which is basically their sort of power. It's complicated, it's just a word. It's not really explained, but whatever. But why do we have his knowledge? Well, you see, humanity ate the fruit of knowledge, so they all carry a piece of the gods. Some particular gods. You just got lucky and got his. Well, as the story progressed, we'll reach the throne after defeating either 2 or 3 of the heroes of the certain alignment, which you'll get to shape the world as you like. And none of them matter since there's a true ending. More on that later. And yes, that is a summary of the plot that is pretty much on point of what happened with no real fluff to flood the story. I'll give a more detailed explanation of some of the story's issues, but to spoil the plot, it's barely there. But before all that, I want to be nice to the game since it's not bad at all. Like the graphics, for example. They're very good. Well, except the pop-ins. I'll never forgive games for having pop-ins in them. It's just bad design in general, as I just wonder why the hell didn't you optimize it? And I only say that because the game looks just damn good. With some new demon redesigns, which look all great, except Hayato. He's just some generic demon dog with this design. Honestly, thinking about it, I kinda wish we had some more demon redesigns, like El Presidente Oze, who, while awesome looking, hasn't had a redesign in over 10 years. Though I get the counter argument that redesigning him just because of how long it's been, it's not great, like Mara, my lord and savior, hasn't had a redesign since the beginning. But it's so iconic to not have it would be demeaning to the faith of Mara, and honestly, it would be something that I wouldn't accept. And again, I really have to mention the model work. They did a good work on making the demons look great. Heck, they actually gave all the demons some unique moves, which just look awesome, and I hope they stay. Though to be nitpicky-ish, like, I still call it a complaint, but it's kind of like in that in-between spot where it's going to be nitpicky and going to be a criticism. Most of the maps look alike. No joke, I could not tell you the difference between this map and this map, except shading and demons in them. Other than that, you could just tell me this was all just one big map, and I wouldn't really argue with you. And let's actually mention the voice acting in this game, which I only bring up because there's something in the game that I really just hate. That being the weird reverb on some characters' voices for some reason. I don't know why they had it there, and it's just awful. And that's just because the normal voice acting just sounds fine. Though honestly, there is an issue with some of the dialogue not fitting well because they didn't change the animation to match the dialogue, which is just weird, which just gives off this bad vibe. But let's finally get into the nitty-gritty with the gameplay. And it's actually mostly unchanged from Nocturne and SNT4 and Apocalypse. That being the press turn system. It works basically like this. You get a set amount of turns, depending on the members you have. The maximum you can have is 4, so you can actually extend this out for a max of 8 moves. By basically exploiting a demon's weakness or passing a turn, your turn becomes a half turn, which continues the turn until all run out. And this applies to your opponents as well. All demons are different and need to be taken out carefully, or else he can counter your ass and just beat you to a bloody pulp. Especially if they're stronger than you, which can pretty much lead you to your team being wiped out before you know it. Or if the game's feeling especially bad, just killing you off and just black screening because fuck you. No joke, I legit want to ask people, who the hell thinks this sort of mechanic is ever good? I have never seen an acceptable reason for why this thing exists. It was never acceptable in Persona 3, 4, 5, Nocturne, Yakuza 7, Final Fantasy 13 for God's sake. Just any game in general. It has never been liked, so I'm asking, why the hell is it here? It's just a dumb mechanic. I legitimately have to ask, who likes this mechanic? Why does it come back? Anyway, so fighting isn't actually the only way to handle a battle. You can just straight up talk to them. Yeah, most demons won't actually have an issue talking to you, except bosses, because they're bosses. This is the famous demon negotiation mechanic, which is needed to get allies on your side so you can actually handle the fights ahead. You do need to watch the moon phase since it does affect certain enemies, which some will or won't talk to you depending on the moon phase, where you'll be normally be unable to recruit most demons. Though I do need to say, I know you love that limp demon over there. You gotta remember, you gotta have the power and the girth to handle all the demons out there. Some days I love doing this. But for real, the only way to get stronger units is to actually use the World of Shadows. The World of Shadows is where you'll gain the use of fusion, where you choose two demons and combine them to get a stronger demon that multis the knot is stronger than what you put in. You can also use demons from the past as long as you have it recorded. Well, they're automatically recorded, though if you want a particular type of demon that was stronger than the one you originally got it, well, again, pay a price, you'll get it back. Or just buy the demon back just to have them back in your party. Fusion is pretty much how you'll get stronger demons or not natural demons unless they willingly join you, which I think only happens a few times, like Finn McCool. I know that's not his name, but it's way more interesting and funny, so I'm sticking with that. Plus also I can never say his name right. There is also a special summoning which requires more demons or doing certain things before being allowed to fuse them into that special demon. Though fusion isn't the only mechanic in the World of Shadow, that being the miracle system. Miracles are a new power accessed by the Nabuhino that lets them have some advantages whether that's be in battle or in fusion. They're basically the same thing as app points from SMT4 and Apocalypse, just a bit more reworked and still useful overall. There are some necessary ones that just make combat overall a lot easier to deal with, like fusion bonuses, which just gives a lot more stat bonuses for using strong demons when fusing, or boosting up the Nabuhino's natural abilities, like making it better at fire skills and whatnot, or giving a minor heal when you have a full Makatsui bar, which is where I'll need to mention that mechanic. This game introduces the Makatsui bar. It's an interesting idea, but it's used so poorly that I must ask the designers its purpose since it feels outright needless. I never actually bothered to utilize it to any extent because why would I need it? But what does it do exactly? Well, it kinda depends. See, for the most part, it's just a free critical, but the problem is I don't need them. Sure, it's nice to have, but that's just it. It just gets free crits. Yes, it just deals more damage and allows you to get full 8 turns, but that's it. And I mean, like, if you're going to try to extend your turns, then you're better off just using just their weaknesses against them, if anything. And with the correct abilities, the loss of MP is so small that you don't have to worry about it too much. Which is where the other thing I need to mention comes in. The most times than not, I just use it as a minor heal to heal up MP and HP, since it would allow me to use more spells overall when fighting bosses, which are just annoying for the most part since they have way too much HP. They have so much HP that some of them have more than some FF13 bosses. Who am I kidding? At least the bosses here allow you to actually do something. And while yes, you can give Makatsui moves to demons, you need to do psych quests which can be kind of annoying at times. And even then, you don't have access to all of these psych quests, meaning you'll have to wait to get them, which just makes it more annoying. And by that point, they'll be useless. And really, the only time I'll ever use them is against bosses, and speaking on bosses, I really want to talk about something Though one thing I'll never forgive is the level of the bosses of the final big area, which is just bullshit. Cause by the time you enter that area, you're at least around your high 50s at a minimum. And the bosses are at level 72. This is not helped with not a lot of enemies being around that high of level. Well, except Yamato no Orochi, but you try fighting that thing at level 60. And I only went after the Yamato no Orochi, it's because there's a useful mechanic in the game that the game doesn't really tell you about. Basically, if you fight stronger demons, you get more XP, but also the inverse happens, which just makes it annoying. Though, let's go back to actually talking about the main subject I was talking about, miracles. But how does one actually acquire miracles exactly? Well, that can be attained by using glory. And you can gain glory by either defeating bosses, opening chests of this variety, or more tight than not, out of these little bastards, the Mitamas. And yes, I call them that because that's a better name than their actual. These guys, for those who don't know, and well, technically you wouldn't know much because these are just something they kind of retroactively did. Basically, they're now the equivalent of metal slimes. There are basically 4 types of them. One for XP, Demon XP, Glory, and Money. These guys are dead useful for some of the endgame stuff, but not entirely, as they're mostly a stopgap to the game's problem, which is just a lack of everything, really. Not enough XP, not enough glory, not enough money, a lot of things, but I'm kinda wondering if they did this deliberately so they could sell the Spawn Rate DLC. What's that? Basically, starting in SMT4, they started selling this DLC to quote-unquote help players grind, even though they made the game grindy to begin with. And I'm really confused on why most people aren't calling foul on this when, serious talk here, they are literally selling an advantage. And before somebody tells me it's not a multiplayer game, didn't we also have an issue with Mankind Divided doing the exact same thing? Though if we are going to talk about the DLC, let's just cover it all. It's not worth it. It's just not. The $4 DLC quests are just pointless. They are literally talking to a character, a fight, that's it. Here's your new demon. Which I have to call bullshit as they should have been in the damn game. And the $10 one for the SMT free Nocturne boss line, again, just pointless that these could have just been in the game for a fun, quick, oh here's a fun side quest you can do. But no, these are just repeats of their bosses just to fit in with SMT fights mechanic. And the only real big difference is now that boss and debuffs last only a few turns instead of permanent. Anyway, there isn't much left to talk about, so let's talk about the story. Though I say that as though there is the rest of the story, as I have to ask, what story? I really can't talk about a plot that isn't really there. A good example of what I'm talking about is Dead Girl, who will, die. And her importance to the plot is as important as the name I literally just gave. She does nothing then die, and it felt pointless because she didn't matter to the plot. Because she's just a character who I can just write off just because she's just thrown in here with little build-up, and her ending is just lackluster at best. I say with no hyperbole that I cared more about the endangered Jack Frost than her, because at least Jack Frost was doing something. Yes, I know she has a tragic backstory, but it was handled so quickly that it's hard to really care to begin with. It's also not helped with also having to use What's-Her-Face in this plot, who is just, in the best terms, a girl. Can you honestly tell me that What's-Her-Face has literally anything to do with the plot if you removed her? Since she doesn't really convince Det to stop, and What's-Her-Face just comes back later on even though she died, and really doesn't do anything other than move the plot along, which literally any other character could have done. Though really, if we're talking about characters that really didn't matter, we're talking about this girl right here. She just literally exists and does nothing. She could be replaced with an NPC and the story would not change. In fact, you could actually extend this to not important, who's here like, he only exists to be an alignment character who's here, I guess. And even then, he doesn't even follow the alignment ideas that much. And it's super weird, but we'll get to that later.
Heck, I barely even mentioned him before, since he's barely on screen, and when he is, he's just there. And strangely, you have Labor, who is, and I wish I was kind of joking, a well-developed law alignment character. There are very few well-developed law alignment characters that also don't just die immediately when they become law. I mean, the story develops him well enough. He's a confused kid trying to get stronger, and as the story progresses, he is convinced that the only way humanity can continue is in the world of law. It's at least developed and doesn't feel out of place since they actually use cutscenes and dialogue to establish his character. Granted, it still feels light and they actually had to explain his backstory a little too much. That feels out of place, but it's still something. That sadly cannot be said for this guy right here, who I barely remember his name other than Copper. And he's hanging out with one of the new demons of the series, Nua, who's there, I guess. Which also makes no sense, as that goes literally against his belief, as you truly don't learn anything about him other than his beliefs that demons suck, some humans suck and should die because they are weak and also asshole. I mean, for God's sakes, you have to learn about its backstory from Nua herself, which is just sort of lazily done as it's just put there with no real prompting. Its only purpose is there to make sure that he's not shallow, which it just comes across as it feels like it doesn't really matter, which it doesn't. It's also more annoying as Nua just disappears after choosing her route, which I'll get to more in a moment, but it's weird, you know? Like, she wouldn't want to stay around and see this through to the end. Anyway, Copper, he's not even boring, he's just there. Heck, if anything, I remember this guy more than him, even though he does even less, and he's a Buddhist deity, which is actually kind of new, since they don't actually do a lot of Buddhist stuff. Weird. And Susanoo, the guy who we're with the most, he has at least an idea of an arc where he's become more human or more understanding of humanity, but it's just like, I'm just here to following whatever you want to do, buddy. And I call him Susanoo because that's more interesting than him just being some artificial demon. At some level, because, come on, because that would at least be something than the nothing. And I just went through most of the game characters, and most of them are not important. Ironically, I can extend this to the antagonists, though to an even lesser extent because, yes, they are even so minor that they're not even worth mentioning most of the time. An example of what I mean is, like, the demon Ariok, the boss of the demon castle, which, that area is okay. I don't get the hate, but I kind of do. It's like, yeah, the puzzle's basically barely a puzzle. It's more of a timing game, if anything, which I can agree can be annoying, but it's not outright terrible. But anyway, since this area is the last stronghold of the Chaos faction, you would think that someone intimidating or powerful would be in charge. Then Ariok comes in. Remember earlier where I mentioned that certain demon design didn't need to be retouched? This is not one of them. He really does need a redesign by now. Cause, dude, just look at him. But really, think about that for a moment. He is the leader of the Chaos faction for a while until, again, later. But other than him, there is no real Chaos faction. There are none. Even though characters like Ashura and Minthra are in the game who would try to do something and maybe be a driving force for some Chaos faction, but don't. And it's not only them. Strangely, Law 2 has barely anyone left in it, but more on that in a moment. Though, if you want a big example of how the game's antagonists are not really that good, you go looking at the Vavel members, or former Vavel members. Throughout the game's marketing, the game hyped up these guys to be like, yeah, these are forces that are just gonna be in your way. They shouldn't be ignored or fucked with lightly. The game, after introducing them, just throws them on a map and doesn't do anything with them after that. For example, Susan's just sitting around here near these ruins, doing absolutely nothing, even though his personality seems like he would be more in the fray and trying to get stuff done. Odin at least makes sense since his personality, he would be more like waiting for the opportune moment when he finds his Nambuhino so he could actually go on the offensive. Fasuki, I'll get back to him in a moment. And if you're annoyed that I just keep saying that I'll get around to that, guess how annoyed I am. You'll notice in that, I left out one person. That being Khonsho, the leader of the Egyptian faction, who they really advertised for that he's on the freaking cover, at least showing that he's at least somewhat important. Guess how much he matters, and if you're not replaying and going for the true ending.
Nothing.
Yep, and if you didn't even do a side quest, he just disappears from the plot entirely. And it's so freaking weird when you realize that. Just think about that for a moment. It'd be like if Jasper from Dragon Quest XI, after like 4 appearances in the plot, he just disappears and doesn't ever reappear again. Or Kingdom Hearts 3 with Organization 13 not doing really anything. My point is that being, why even make him when he's doing nothing? And before somebody tells me about the true ending thing and how he's important to getting that ending, fuck you. Nobody liked that. It was bullshit when SMT4 neutral ending required that we had to do some stupid side quest just to make sure that we weren't too neutral to get the neutral ending. Yeah, that's a thing. And even then, at least SMT4 neutral ending thing kinda made sense in some regard, while this means literally nothing. They don't literally tie in together. The point is, why waste him when you could have made it more meaningful by, I don't know, having Zeus taking Khonsho's key to the throne, and why he bailed out to begin with since he feels like he's not ready yet, and deciding that fighting us would actually be a good way to measure his strength now to try a rematch. And just to bash this in again, the only reason why I did this side quest to begin with was because Zeus was level 72 when I was barely at level 56. But really? You want a bigger example? Yeah, Khonsho isn't even the biggest example. Fasuki, you see, he's just a stand-in for Shiva who's doing stuff. But even if you don't fight him, it doesn't really matter. Which just boggles my fucking mind as, how do you make the fucking leader of a faction not important to the plot? It just blows my fucking mind. Heck, the only way to actually fight Shiva is if you're high enough level. And he's at level 96. For reference, that is literally 10 levels above the final boss. And remember, you have to fight Shiva to get the true ending. Which I also had to add, you have to beat the game to get the true ending. Yes!
Just why? Why even bother?
Heck, even more baffling, the final boss is kind of easy once you know how he works. I mean, like, you can say that about all the bosses, but I mean that in the sense of, he is truly very easy. Though, since we're actually talking about the final boss, let's actually talk about Lucifer for a moment. So, Lucifer has won, right? But what the hell does he want now? Well, basically, he's actually waiting for someone to come along to challenge him. Since he still believes in chaos, he basically wants the new guy to take over and destroy the mandala system. The what? Yes, the mandala system. You know, the system that just got literally introduced right the fuck at the end of the final boss. And it's really never explained. I could go on for a fucking hour about how stupid this thing is. I really could. But let's not. You know something I could go on about? That being how the game's alignment system is kinda dumb. I say that because I felt that the game at times did not properly explain the alignment of the game that much. Yes, I am arguing that SMT's fights alignment make little sense at times, and I honestly feel like some of the characters should have been flicked around a bit. And let's at least show off what I thought the game was doing, and here's how the game actually does it. Yes, I know it's a bit odd, but I'll explain, and let's get the biggest oddity out of here, the law alignment. Out of everyone in the cast, Copper has the most reason to be a law character due to his backstory. Since his backstory is about terrible people messing it up for nice people with demons also messing with them too, causing issues. So it confuses the fuck out of me that the game thinks he's neutral in any of this, or how it even means neutral when it just means kill all demons, when the game series as a whole, including this game might I add, has shown a good chunk of demons aren't even evil, just either want to be left alone to their own devices with other demons, or be allies or be in peace with humanity. And Copper, even himself, isn't following his own beliefs since, he's working with a demon who actually gave him his powers. So why does he think killing all the demons would fix even half the issues the world is having, when he again is using the powers of demons to get his goal to begin with? Then we get Lamer and how he should be chaos in some regards, since again most of his scenes are about power and money scenes. Honestly, if you just rewrote them or just cut some of the scenes out, he would just be a straight up chaos character, since his belief becomes that power is important throughout the game, which is a constant thing shown and, impressed upon him. I mean, it works either or, it's just that it makes more sense for chaos since that's more of their deal. Now, we finally get neutrality since Non-Important wants to just protect Tokyo, so he joins with Tsukiyomi, who wants to make sure that Tokyo's safe, but also wants the myriad of gods to be around as well, which is just a bit weird, but has shown that humanity can work with demons in many instances, and it not ending terribly. The reason why the game calls this the chaos ending is because the throne is still around, and as long as the demons have a way to reach this, the entire situation will happen again. Granted, the problem can be solved also by destroying the throne after you do that, since it's the root of the problem with no one being able to be in charge. The demons and humanity will be forced to work together to get shit worked out. Or, just hit the reset button and make it so that they have to work together. I'm just saying. And really, my problem with the endings, and I'm bringing this up now because since I am mentioning the ending, let's really dive into what's the problem with all the endings. And I can usually summarize it as one word. Deus Ex Machina device. Well, technically it's 2 words, but you get the idea. For whatever reason, I don't know why, it's like the game forgot that the throne is a literal Deus Ex Machina. It allows you to change the universe as you see fit. I repeat that. It allows you to change the universe however you want. So instead of them all just doing the one thing that they would all want, you get a half-ass version of what they want, which is the most bizarre thing I've ever seen in my life. The world of law will carry on, but without God for some reason, which makes no sense, but I don't know, maybe just revive him? Chaos is the weirder thing because the world is already like that, so I'm not seeing much of a difference. And neutrality is, again, just the normal world now without the throne. So I ask, what's the problem? And the true ending just removes all the demons in general. And I mean as in truly removes them. As in no longer existing. It's just like, why? At the end of it all, I'm just curious on why peace isn't achievable here. When you again have a Deus Ex Machina device. Maybe my issue is just that the plot feels so ham-fisted that the game is not really exploring its setting very well to begin with. I mean, going back to the beginning a bit where I mentioned this is a pretty damn different situation before us. In SMT2, Law won. They were basically in charge. But now we have a flip situation where Law is on the run. In fact, it's even worse for them since not only have they lost their central figure, even the Archangels are gone. I mean, why not do something interesting with them? Like, maybe give them an actual schism. Like, what should they do now? Like, maybe have Mastema return and lead a faction of angels who just want to protect humanity even if they don't follow the law. But maybe be like a bit judgy about it, but not too judgy, you know what I mean? And maybe Avdiel being the hardliner who believes in the law to the point that she would just extinguish humanity because of this. Heck, I could say that about Chaos as well, since its leader, Lucifer, is gone. So why not do something different with them? Like, maybe make all the Chaos factions be fragmented and trying to vie for power. Or maybe like a point in the story where we had to make an alliance with one of these demons, which could cause issues for later. But no, the Chaos faction is barely here, and if you tell me what's left of Avel is another Chaos faction, no. No.
I just felt like they didn't want to actually focus on anything in the goddamn plot. That they didn't want to even consider what to do with any of the elements inside the plot. Just go along with nothing much happening. And it's very annoying.
Just to be clear here, I don't doubt the developers were trying to tell a great and interesting story. But it's just, the more I look back on it, the more I have to wonder of what could have been, since the game's story leaves me longing. I'm actually now going to explain the title of this review. Higher Ambitions, No Humanity. Because that's how it felt like throughout the entire game. Because without that element, the story will always feel hollow. After all, it doesn't want to connect to me or connect to anyone in this story, so why should I care about its themes and ideas? Technically, this entire last segment is just more me just talking about stuff, counterclaims and whatnot, so if you want my final thoughts, go to this time frame. If not, let's actually talk about some counter-criticism that I want to address now. To basically counter criticism for my review, I'll talk about them now. So, I've been told that this game is reminiscent of older RPGs, and I'm throwing this text up so you know what I'm actually arguing again. Because this was an actual comment left to me on somebody else's channel, but point being, I got commented this. And to run this down, one, classic JRPGs, what the heck does that even mean? Since it's both limited and too big to give a definitive answer. So for the sake of this argument, I'm just gonna think that it's most likely talking about the SNES era and PS1 era, which I just had to laugh my ass off as somebody who has played so many JRPGs in my lifetime. I could definitely call that some complete bullshit. I mean, to be frank, they did use cutscene to tell stories, which is mostly, well, I can agree, can be short, but they weren't short to a point where they were leaving shit out, unlike this game. My second point, exposition dump. I find this even more laughable since that's this game in a nutshell. Since it has to do that so often because there aren't enough smaller scenes to space it out and allow for character insight instead of dumping their backstory on us with lackluster purpose of quote-unquote developing them. 3. As, again, someone who's played a lot of RPGs, I find it funny as someone who's talked to NPCs on my own terms, I didn't learn anything from them that the game could have said to me in another main story moment. Heck, I played some older RPGs lately, like the Phantasy Star remake, and which, let me remind you, has sort of aged poorly with some bad direction, and pausing the game until I talked to a few characters a few amount of times, even though I got the info I wanted, and could make logical guess of where I need to go, but won't let me because I didn't talk to this person 4 times instead of 3. Yes, it can be that bullshit. To really talk about my own thoughts on this game to the fullest, I'm gonna mention one last thing. Remember that IGN quote about Persona without the heart? Well, in that review, it had a line that I liked and had to really repeat here. So, here we go. It takes upwards of 20 hours to find any personal motivation beyond survival and figuring out what's going on. And the companion characters are very underdeveloped. You don't get to spend enough time with most of them for one thing, since they usually don't join you in battle, or even have their own side stories. You run into them for a few minutes during cutscenes after many hours of adventuring, and none of them seem to have an in-depth backstory or even much of a character arc. They exist mostly as decoration on a story that cares more about big concepts than people. That quote was really a microcosm of what this game's problem is, as it's more motivated by its themes than literally anything else that it hampers the story that, it's trying to convey those themes.
In the end, like I said, I like the gameplay, it's alright, but the story is just not worth playing. Next time, we're gonna import a game and have a little fun with that. With Gintama Rumba.